Well, our globalist friends at the World Economic Forum have just wrapped up their 2023 Davos meeting, and they really did not disappoint, as usual. We got to learn a lot about how they plan on taking over the world, and what I've done here is curated a lot of different clips from the meeting last week that you can watch, and this way you can kind of see what happened and get a good sense of where the World Economic Forum is planning on going moving ahead. So stick around and enjoy this video. I've split it up into different sections for those who like to stay organized, and stick around all the way to the end because I have included a very special treat for you. But take this opportunity to like and subscribe.
Cooperation in a fragmented world. At the beginning of this year, we are confronted with unprecedented and multiple challenges. We need to overcome the most critical fragmentation.
So this was Klaus Schwab's big opening. This is where he was supposed to be getting all the billionaires and powerful people riled up and ready to talk about how they were going to take over the world and how great it's going to be in a few years when they do so. But you notice that he sounds a little somber, actually, and he might have a reason for that. That's because a lot of his friends didn't show up. Who was missing from the World Economic Forum this year? Well, some of our favorites like Jacinda Ardern and Bill Gates and Prime Minister Modi and also Vladimir Putin, but I think we know why Vladimir Putin didn't show up. And Zelensky was too busy to show up, but his wife came for him. Predisposed at the moment with all of that American money.
And the most critical fragmentation is between those who take a constructive attitude and those who are just bystanders, observers, and
NPCs for you young folk.
And even go into the negative, critical, and confrontational attitude.
So he was talking about people like me right there. And Klaus, poor Klaus, just not having a good time, and he's mad at the people who will just not hop on board with his worldwide communist takeover. Now, the first thing I'm going to start you off with is our next big catastrophe, and that is going to be a cyber attack. And how do I know that? Well, I don't know that for sure, but I can speculate because last time they warned us of a pandemic happened right afterwards. So let's see what these cyber geeks have to say.
We're here today to share the findings of the World Economic Forum's Global Security Outlook Report 2023. This is a result of research in collaboration with the forum's communities and our partner Accenture, in which we've interviewed and sought input from over 300 executives globally. The most striking finding that we found is that 93% of cyber leaders and 86% of cyber business leaders believe that the geopolitical instability makes a catastrophic cyber event likely in the next 2 years.
Now, a major cause of this instability that could cause this cyber attack is the spreading of dangerous misinformation. But don't worry, the World Economic Forum has an expert on hand.
Talk from the newsroom and the news publishing perspective, and then we'll work our way toward some of the political parts of the conversation. How does this discussion of disinformation relate to everything else happening here today in Davos?
Well, first, thanks for having me as part of this conversation. As you can imagine, this is something I really care deeply about. So I think if you look at this question of disinformation, I think it maps basically to every other major challenge that we are grappling with as a society, and particularly the most existential among them. So disinformation and the broader set of misinformation, conspiracy, propaganda, clickbait, the broader mix of bad information that's corrupting the information ecosystem.
Oh, I know what he's talking about. I've seen this NPR, MSNBC all the time.
What it attacks is trust. And once you see trust decline, what you then see is societies start to fracture. And so you see people fracture along tribal lines, and that immediately undermines pluralism. And the undermining of pluralism is probably the most dangerous thing that can happen to a democracy. So I think if you're spending this week thinking about the health of democracies and democratic erosion, I think it's really important to work your way back up to where this starts.
And by that, I'm pretty sure he did not mean the World Economic Forum, which maybe he should have, or the federal government. I don't know. I don't know who tells Joe Biden what to do on his cue card. Now, here's European Commission VP Vera Jourova on the future of hate speech in America.
The language and the case law in the country, because what qualifies as hate speech, as illegal hate speech, which you will have soon also in the US. I think that we have a strong reason why we have this in the criminal law. We need the platforms to simply work with the language and to identify such cases. The AI would be too dangerous. Well,
now here's another expert on misinformation, and he comes all the way from the United States to help the world understand how to do it the right way.
I think the sophistication of the private sector is improving, and particularly important, the level of collaboration between the private sector and the government, especially the FBI, has, I think, made significant strides. Pretty much every technology we could talk about today, we see both great opportunity but great dangers in the wrong hand.
And of course, by wrong hands, he means any hands other than the FBI's. I'm going to use that next clip to segue into my next segment, which is the vaccine and all of the dystopian vaccine information that we got from the World Economic Forum.
The extent of this misinformation when it comes to vaccination.
Now, am I the only one who thinks that woman looked like she kissed a bee?
I think has, as somebody who works in the media, I mean, that was just overwhelming to see all of that across all the channels, right?
Yes, and I exactly agree with panelists, which is, I think, in some countries, you saw scientific debate in national TV at prime time. So you can imagine how people were scared. Ben has said, a lot of political debate in some countries, and the US was kind of maybe one of the worst places in the world. And you saw the differences of countries where all the parties would say, this has been approved by the regulators, clinical studies have been done, you should get your vaccines and so on.
Except, no, the studies hadn't been done, and it was not really approved. It was allowed for emergency use, and that's just so nobody could get in trouble for it.
And then, as Seth said, I mean, the social media was just terrible. And so at a time of uncertainty where people were scared for their loved ones, many people, locked downs, it was very hard for everybody from a just mental health standpoint. When you couple this with all that environment, you could see some countries where you had scientific debate and political debate and social media. If you had those three things, the vaccine rate very, very low.
Absolutely.
So the countries who were able to debate about it and talk about it freely had low vaccination rates? Weird.
The healthcare system is still under stress. And what I hope people will understand is the vaccine not only protects individuals from transmission and
well, there's a verifiable lie.
Severity, but it protects our health systems. We're able to have a functional or almost functional health system because we don't have the kinds of severe disease that we were facing in 2020.
All thanks to herd immunity. Now, when no one seems to be following all your rules or doing whatever you say, who do you call in to help? Well, how about Tony Blair? Let's see what Tony's got to say.
You won't get the focus you need unless it's clear two things. One, that there is an ongoing challenge and opportunity. And I think that is not just about COVID. It's about the fact that we are going to have a whole slew of new vaccines, injectables that are going to deal with some of the worst diseases in the world, that give us the opportunity to make big changes in the health of the world. When it's all said and done, it was still a pretty remarkable operation. And by the way, CEPI did a fantastic job. You guys deserve a lot of congratulations for it. But so I think it's around things like, how do you make sure you get the right scientific cooperation and the cooperation between the regulatory authorities, so in the future you can clear things much faster?
All those pesky roadblocks that ensure there's no conflict of interest when you're trying to ensure that something is safe for public use.
For example, on the continent of Africa, if we had an equivalent to the European Medicines Agency, we had an African Medicines Agency that allowed you to have one system, one standard, it would hugely change the way that vaccines and treatments are introduced in Africa.
Well, Tony, what do you suggest we do?
I think there's a huge impetus now for a national digital infrastructure. Digitization in healthcare is, I think, one of the great game changers. We should be helping countries to develop a national digital infrastructure, which they will need with these new vaccines. And then, finally, it's also about showing people and showing the political leadership that you can make a positive difference to your healthcare system by adopting these measures, because they've got an impact beyond any particular disease or pandemic.
Yeah, using it for needs other than a pandemic is what we're kind of worried about. So why do you need this database?
You need to know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been. Some of the vaccines that will come on down the line will be there'll be multiple shots. So you've got to have, for reasons to do with the healthcare more generally, but certainly for a pandemic or for vaccines, you've got to have a proper digital infrastructure, and many countries don't have that. In fact, most countries don't have that.
And of course, you couldn't have a World Economic Forum without Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer.
The first year of the pandemic, we produced 3 billion doses of a vaccine that we never had manufactured before. But if you ask me what was the biggest challenge, I think it was the political challenge. I think the vaccines, the COVID, and the ability to deliver or not vaccines, and then after we delivered, the ability to use them or not, became severely politicized and became a political statement if you are wearing a mask or not. Became a political statement if you believe we will have a vaccine or not. And after we had the vaccine, it became a political statement if you believe it works or not. And then we went to more extremes, if you believe that COVID existed or not. All of these were constantly on our way. And I'm a businessman, I'm a scientist, I'm not a politician. And the same is the same for all of my peers, right? The head of Moderna, the head of J&J, the head of AstraZeneca, that they were trying to do the same. And that we found it the most challenging of all the tasks. And that continued after the vaccine. As you know, governments, everybody was scared at that time.
Right. Everybody was scared at that time. So that's how they were able to pressure governments into accepting this untested vaccine of theirs. Now, this is probably something that you weren't aware of before, but these vaccines were being developed before there was even a COVID-19. Watch this.
The last time we were here in Davos in the winter, it was January 2020.
Yeah.
And I saw you at that point, and we were at a breakfast right over here at the Belvedere.
I remember.
And you came up to me in this small room, and you were talking about how you had actually, you were working on a vaccine for COVID. And at that point, COVID-19 didn't even really exist in our minds. We were just hearing about the
I think there was no name at that time.
Coronavirus. Yeah, right.
So that makes me wonder, are they already working on a security patch for this upcoming cyber attack? I don't know. Well, here is some dystopian biomedical information, and here's some things we can look forward to in the future.
Surveillance of the human brain can be powerful, helpful, useful, transform the workplace, and make our lives better. It also has a dystopian possibility of being used to exploit and bring to the surface our most secret self. It threatens fundamentally what our own self-identity is in some ways, and threatens to become a tool of oppression.
You don't say. Well, tell me more about it.
I am a futurist. I'm not a perfect predictor of the future, but I'll give you my 1-year, 5-year, 10-year. So focusing in the world of wearable technology as opposed to implanted technology. And I do believe that within many of our lifetimes, we'll see healthy people using implanted brain technology as well. Then we can decode complex thought. But as healthy people in a widespread way start to have their brainwave data collected, the insights that we can gain through pattern recognition will exponentially increase and pretty quickly. So 5 years from now, what we can actually decode will be massively increased from where we are today, simply because we'll have a much greater data set from which we can actually create those correlations. Again, that's frightening but promising. So you have recognition memory signals that are preconscious and subconscious, and this is part of why it's been used, for example, by governments to interrogate criminals. Do you recognize this potential co-conspirator? Do you recognize, this murder weapon?
Wait, what?
Those preconscious signals, like what we call the P300 wave or the N400 wave, these are before you even consciously process information, so you could prime it with a number and then see if a person recognizes it. And you can do it without them realizing that that's what you're doing.
So will all of our passwords be cracked first by this or quantum computing? Hard to tell. All right.
I think we're moving past passwords pretty quickly. And
I saw a hand
it's
go
actually
up.
really good for passwords. Neural signatures are unique. We can use it as a biometric for passwords.
I guess that's good news, right? Well, here's some not so good news.
Friends, scientifically, this is not a climate crisis. We are now facing something deeper. Mass extinction, air pollution, undermining ecosystem functions, really putting humanity's future at risk. This is a planetary crisis.
By 2070, as many as 3 billion people will live in uninhabitable zones.
You look at what's happening with species. Half the species of the planet have been already killed.
So everybody knows that the biggest threat that all humanity faces is climate change. And there was no shortage of scientific minds in Davos to tell us all about it. This first one you'll recognize as Greta Thunberg. She was on hand, and she had been protesting in Germany. Now, this little ragamuffin has never worked for $1 in her life, and what they were protesting in Germany was a coal mine that's going to take out an old village. Now, this coal mine had been shut down but had to reopen since nobody can afford to keep their lights on and their heating on in Germany. So Ragamuffin goes out there and protests when she's perfectly warm and also has a nice little arrest staged for her. So let's watch all that. Ready? Ready? Okay, Miss Thunberg. Time to get up and be arrested. Oh, really? Do I have to go right now? Yes, yes. Come on, we'll help you up. Come on, ladies. Come on, ladies. You move over here. Here we go. Here we go. Oh, look at this mud. You just go the rest of the way by yourself.
You also want those for email? Wie sieht's denn aus mit der Abadstraße? Was mit der?
Now, it wasn't just welfare queens who enjoy the spotlight, it was also real men of science. I bet you've never heard this fun science fact, have you?
You look at what's happening with species. Half the species of the planet have been already killed.
I apologize for the sound quality, and you may not have heard that, but he said half the species on the planet had already been killed. I'm not really sure what he's talking about. I don't know if he's talking about since the beginning of the planet, because then I would say it's probably a lot more than half. But hey, this is John Kerry. Who am I to question? Because John Kerry is one of those special types of human beings that just aren't around a lot.
And when you stop and think about it, it's pretty extraordinary that we, select group of human beings, because of whatever touched us at some point in our lives, are able to sit in a room and come together and actually talk about saving the planet. I mean, it's so almost extraterrestrial to think about, quote, saving the planet. And if you said that to most people, they think you're just a crazy tree-hugging, lefty, liberal, do-gooder, whatever, and there's no relationship. But really, that's where we are.
Oh, John, you do-gooder. There's no way you're in it for all the...
Money, 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 money. You know, the State of the Union's coming up, and the president's got to, you know, and I think will because he believes this, we got to move this. Because that's the only way we keep 1.5 degrees alive. So how do we get there? Well, the lesson I've learned in the last years, and I learned it as secretary, and I've learned it since, reinforced in spades, is money, 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 money. And I'm sorry to say that. I mean, yes, technology, yes, exciting new initiatives, yes, organizing, winning races politically. I mean, what happened in the midterms in the United States is nothing less than miraculous. And it happened because young people voted. And the second most voted issue was climate. It's a huge deal. But we have to go further. I have said this before, but I say it again. I'm convinced we will get to a low-carbon, no-carbon economy. We're going to get there because we have to. I am not convinced we're going to get there in time to do what the scientists said, which is avoid the worst consequences of the crisis.
Gosh, could they have invited a bigger loser to come talk to them about climate change? Well, what a silly question to ask.
Enough already. Enough. And I don't want to get sidetracked onto what needs to happen, but we need to scale up climate finance, but we need desperately to scale down anti-climate finance. And we are still subsidizing the burning of fossil fuels globally at a rate 42 times larger than the subsidies for the shift toward renewables and EVs, et cetera. We need new leadership at the World Bank. We need them to scale up the leverage and vastly increase the amounts that are committed. And we need to rein in the anti-climate activities of the fossil industry.
Remember when Al Gore told us this is what was going to happen to the planet? And to think we were one hanging Chad away from having him as president. Well, if you're not convinced yet that this is a communist/socialist world takeover, watch this and maybe this will finally convince you.
And it's something that is not often mentioned, capitalism. Can the capitalism that we have known in the last 30, 40 years overcome the climate crisis that the capitalism helped create? It's a rhetorical question, but it also makes sense, because if the answer is no, then we're wasting our time as we reach the no return point. The capitalism that we know nowadays has a driving force and logic, and that is to increase our profits in such a way, and that's how we talk about history, to regulate everything without political or social boundaries. And that's the one we have. This has resulted in some sort of global anarchy. We have individual capitalists who try to make the most profit, and this is linked to their capital and productivity. So to achieve more in less time, and productivity is linked to energy. And almost the only source of energy to increase profit is carbon, oil and gas, coal, oil and gas. And this has resulted in a change in our atmosphere. We have to put an end to this if we wish to live in our planet. Can our capitalism do this? Based on the current data, we won't be able to do so. Therefore, perhaps we should do the following reflection. If capitalism is unable to do so, either humanity will die with it, or humanity will overcome capitalism so that we can live in our planet. And let me go to another point. Let's say that we have a different type of capitalism, different from what we...
There you go, folks. That's Davos 2023 in a nutshell. And really, there's so much more, but I think this is probably the most relevant stuff. And here's my thoughts on the World Economic Forum going forward. I don't think that their platform is as popular as it used to be. I think people who have participated and continue to participate in the World Economic Forum are starting to become subjects of ridicule, and they should. They deserve it. And I think it's just really lost its luster. And with ESGs, the World Economic Forum's way of subverting democracy, we can already see that Vanguard, one of the largest investment firms, has pulled out of ESG investing, which is a huge deal. And also, DeSantis and a couple of other governors from around the country are ensuring that none of the state's investments are going towards ESG investments, which that would be BlackRock and the other large investment firms that are involved with that. Well, what do you think? Let me know. Write it down below. And please subscribe if you haven't. I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope you've gotten something out of it. And really the best thing you can do is share this. And that's why I do this, is to just share this information out so that everybody is more informed of what's going on around them in the world. And I'm going to leave you with one little treat after this, so don't go away. But until next time, peace be with you.
Like a flower or a tree, I'll throw my head back and sing, I sing, I sing, I sing, I sing.